"Get out and stay out," my dad yelled. They threw me out for dropping out of surgical residency. They didn't know I was worth $32 million. Next day, I moved to my Laguna Beach fortress. 3 weeks later. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from right now. Have you ever had to choose between your family's dreams and your own? I'd love to hear your story. The house in Philadelphia always carried the scent of antiseptic soaked into antique wood, like someone had tried to sterilize history but failed to remove the rot beneath it. It was a stone manor on the main line, all sharp edges and inherited arrogance, designed to intimidate before anyone even stepped through the door. It felt less like a home and more like a museum dedicated to the Sterling name. My father, Dr. David Sterling, chief of surgery, ruled it the way he ruled an operating room: precision, authority, no dissent. In that house, love wasn't warmth, it was rationed, it was performance-based. Dinner was at 6 p.m. exactly, not 6:02, not 6:05. Tyler, my older brother and the heir apparent, occupied the chair to my father's right like a crown prince. I sat to his left, close enough to observe the throne, but never close enough to inherit it. My mother, Patricia, sat at the end of the long mahogany table, positioned like a decorative centerpiece rather than a participant. The walls were crowded with oil portraits of men in surgical coats, ancestors immortalized with stern expressions and steady hands gripping scalpels. Their painted eyes followed us, silent jurors evaluating the next generation. "Tyler, tell us about the aneurysm repair," my father would say, slicing into his steak with the same focus he used in surgery. "Clean clipping, Dad," Tyler would reply, chest expanding with pride. "Dr. Evans let me close." "Excellent," my father would respond with a short, approving nod. Then his gaze would shift to me. "Chloe, how was your rotation?" I learned quickly there was only one acceptable script: 36 hours on call, 3 appendectomies, sutures flawless. I never spoke about the other existence unfolding in parallel, the one that began after midnight when I slipped into the hospital server room instead of the residence lounge. While Tyler memorized procedural checklists, I trained algorithms to recognize anatomical anomalies. Where they saw tradition, I saw inefficiency. Where they trusted instinct, I trusted data. My partner Ethan, a quiet coding genius I met during undergrad, and I had built something we called Panacea, an AI framework capable of predicting surgical complications in real time, identifying risks before a scalpel ever touched skin. My father dismissed technology as subordinate labor. "Real doctors cut," he said. "Real doctors bled with their patients. Anything else was clerical noise." So I lived split in two. By daylight, I was the obedient surgical resident, closing incisions. By night, I engineered a system that could outperform the hierarchy I was born into. The strain hollowed me out. Sometimes I would find my mother alone in the drawing room, staring at the grand piano she hadn't played in decades. Dust collected along the ivory keys like a quiet accusation. She had once been a concert pianist before she married into the Sterling dynasty. Now she organized galas and curated dinner menus. One evening, I found her gently pressing a single, silent key, not enough to make sound. "Do you miss it?" I asked. She recoiled as if I had uncovered something forbidden. "Don't be dramatic, Chloe. Your father needed stability, not a performer." That was when clarity struck me. My mother wasn't simply passive. She was proof of what surrender looked like. She'd exchanged passion for protection, autonomy for prestige, and somewhere deep inside, she resented my resistance because it exposed the choice she never made. When she told me to obey my father, it wasn't guidance, it was self-preservation. If I escaped, it would mean she could have. That truth would unravel her entire life. So I kept working in silence, stitching flesh by day and building code by night, waiting for the moment the equation would balance. The notification arrived during the 36th consecutive hour of my shift. I had just stepped out of a 7-hour craniotomy, my hands raw from scrubbing, fluorescent lights drilling into my skull. My phone vibrated against my hip. One email. Subject line: acquisition complete. Wiring amount: $32 million. I didn't celebrate. I didn't exhale. I stared at the glowing number while flecks of dried blood dotted my surgical clogs. The figure looked unreal, like a misread vital sign on a monitor. But it wasn't a flat line. It was ignition. Ethan had closed the deal. Panacea had been acquired by a major medical tech conglomerate. Our work, our secret nights, had turned into leverage. I drove straight to the manor without changing. Rain lashed against the windshield, turning the slate driveway into a dark mirror. I walked in wearing my scrubs, wanting them to see the uniform they revered one final time. Dinner was underway. Silverware scraped against porcelain in a rigid rhythm. Tyler was recounting how he humiliated a junior resident. My father presided at the head of the table like a monarch in exile from empathy. "I'm resigning," I said, remaining standing. My father didn't lift his eyes. "Sit down, Chloe. You're exhausted. We'll discuss this tomorrow." "I already submitted my resignation to the board 20 minutes ago," I replied. My voice didn't waver. "I am done with surgery. I am done with this hospital. I am done performing a role written before I was born." The silence cracked through the room. My father set his fork down with deliberate calm. When he finally looked at me, I saw no father there, only ownership. "You are a sterling," he said quietly. "We operate. That is our identity. Walk away, and you walk away from this family." "I built something transformative, Dad. I'm stepping into a technology division that will save more lives than a single scalpel ever could." His chair scraped back violently. "Technology? You want to reduce yourself to support staff?" He struck the table, crystal trembling. "You are disgracing generations." There it was. Not concern, not fear for my future. Wounded ego, narcissistic injury. To David Sterling, children were reflections. By choosing a path he couldn't dominate, I shattered the mirror. "If you leave tonight," he hissed, "you leave with nothing. No trust fund, no introductions, no name." "I don't need your name," I answered. "I have my own." "Give me the keys," he demanded. "I funded your life. If you want independence, start from zero." I removed the Audi key fob from my pocket and placed it on the linen tablecloth beside his wine glass. "You financed everything except my mind." Then I turned and walked out. My mother inhaled sharply, a fragile sound, but she remained seated. She always remained seated.
Rain drenched me as I stepped onto the porch. I carried only a laptop bag and a phone containing a $32 million balance. The door slammed behind me like a verdict. He believed he had punished me. In reality, he had severed me from decay. I walked to the far edge of the estate and sat on a slick stone wall beneath the trees. I opened my laptop. My personal accounts showed zero. My father had frozen the dormant trust fund and canceled every card. Homeless, penniless, that was the narrative he wanted. I logged into the encrypted cloud account Ethan and I maintained. The acquisition funds waited in escrow. $32 million. Not just currency, autonomy, authority. I authorized the transfer. Then I searched California properties. I had always imagined ocean air instead of gray Pennsylvania winters. I found it quickly, a fortress in Laguna Beach priced at $24.5 million. Brutalist concrete and glass balanced on a cliff in Emerald Bay. Severe yet elegant, like a sanctuary carved from resolve. I called the realtor despite the late hour. "I'll take it, cash, today." She hesitated. "You haven't toured it." "I've seen enough. Send the documents." By the time the rain stopped, the house was mine. I didn't book a hotel. I went to the startup office and slept in the server room, wrapped in my damp coat on a beanbag chair. The steady hum of cooling fans felt like a lullaby of independence. The next morning, I boarded a flight west without announcing my departure. No farewell, no explanation. The Laguna house rose above the Pacific like a concrete sentinel. Inside, the rooms echoed with ocean thunder. I felt no euphoria, only security. I installed surveillance, hired private security, bought a white Range Rover simply because I could. I drove along the coast with the windows down, salt air tangling my hair, unconcerned with opinion for the first time in my life. I was constructing more than a home. I was building distance. For 3 weeks, the quiet wrapped around me like anesthesia. I woke without alarms, ate without scrutiny, existed without evaluation. I was a ghost liberated from a lineage that demanded conformity. Then the contagion hit. TechCrunch ran the profile on Tuesday morning. The headline was catchy, designed for clicks. The surgeon who traded the scalpel for code inside the $32 million exit. It detailed everything, the acquisition price, the technology, and in a small paragraph near the bottom, it mentioned my relocation to a private estate in Emerald Bay, Laguna Beach. The news traveled from Silicon Valley to the Philadelphia main line faster than a virus in a pressurized cabin. My phone, usually dormant, began to seize on the kitchen counter, notifications stacked like incoming trauma cases, cousins I hadn't spoken to in a decade, medical school peers who had snubbed me, and then the inner circle. Tyler texted first. No greeting, no congratulations, just a screenshot of the article and 3 words. Is this real? It wasn't brotherly concern, it was an audit. Tyler was calculating the net worth between a neurosurgeon resident and a tech founder, and the math was making him sick. I didn't reply. Then my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to it standing by the infinity pool, the ocean crashing below. Chloe, her voice cracked, thick with performance anxiety. Your father is falling apart. He saw the article. He's in a state. We didn't know. You have to understand. We were just worried about you. We're coming to see you. We need to repair this family before it's too late. We land on Saturday. They weren't asking, they were announcing. It was the old dynamic. They dictated the schedule, and I was expected to scrub in. But they had miscalculated the venue. They weren't coming to the manor in Philadelphia where they held the keys. They were coming to my fortress. I could have blocked them. I could have told security to turn them away at the gate, but I realized that wouldn't be enough. If I blocked them, I would always be the runaway child in their narrative, the daughter who couldn't handle the pressure. I needed them to see. I needed them to walk through the concrete halls. I needed David to look at the empire I built with servants' tools. I texted back 2 words, Saturday, noon. Then I prepared the house. I didn't buy flowers. I didn't soften the edges. I wanted the house to look exactly like what it was, cold, expensive, and impenetrable. I wasn't preparing a home for a family reunion. I was preparing a boardroom for a hostile takeover. I called Ethan. They're coming, I said. Do you want me there? He asked. No, I said. I need to do this alone, but keep the server logs open. I might need to show them the back end. You're going to show them the code? No, I said, looking at the sun reflecting off the water like a blade. I'm going to show them the future. They arrived at noon, exactly. A white rental sedan crawled up the winding driveway looking like a toy car against the massive scale of the concrete walls. I watched from the upper terrace. They stepped out into the California sun, blinking like moles dragged into the light. They were dressed for a Philadelphia country club, heavy tweeds, stiff loafers, pearls. In the stark, salt air brightness of Laguna, they looked gray. They looked out of place. They looked like the past. I walked down to meet them. I didn't offer a hug. I didn't offer a hand. I just unlocked the 10-foot pivot door and stood aside. Welcome, I said. They walked in. The silence of the house swallowed them. David stopped in the foyer, his eyes scanning the 30-foot ceilings, the floating staircase, the wall of glass framing the Pacific Ocean. He was looking for a crack. He was looking for dust. He was looking for something to criticize so he could reestablish his dominance. But I ran this house like an operating theater. It was sterile. It was perfect. It's substantial, he muttered, unable to meet my eyes. It's secure, I corrected. I led them on the tour. It wasn't a tour of a home. It was a tour of a fortress. I showed them the infinity pool that dropped off into the horizon. I showed them the guest house that was larger than our entire downstairs in Philly. Tyler walked behind me, running the math in his head. I could practically hear the gears turning, calculating the property tax, the down payment, the net worth required to sustain this. He looked sick. Patricia didn't speak. She just touched the surfaces, the cold marble, the warm walnut with trembling fingers. She wasn't looking at the luxury, she was looking at the freedom. She was realizing that the cage she had spent 30 years polishing was just a cage, and I was standing on the outside holding the key. We sat for lunch on the cantilevered deck. The ocean roared below us, a constant violent reminder of where we were. The private chef served a charred octopus salad. David poked at it suspiciously. He couldn't take the silence.
He couldn't take the shift in gravity. He needed to be the chief of surgery again. He needed to be the smartest man in the room. "It's a nice view, Chloe," he said, putting down his fork. "But let's be realistic. Real estate is a volatile asset. Real work, real legacy happens in the hospital." I took a sip of sparkling water. "Is that so?" "In fact," he said, leaning back, finding his rhythm, "we are revolutionizing the department. We just licensed a new system, a surgical intelligence platform." My heart didn't speed up. It slowed down. It was the predator's calm. David beamed. He was back in his pulpit. "It's incredible, actually. It uses predictive algorithms to map complications before we even make the incision. It's analyzing thousands of data points in real time. It's going to save the department's accreditation. We were slipping, I admit it, but this is the future. It catches mistakes the human eye misses." "It sounds expensive," I said, baiting the hook. "Quality costs," he scoffed. "We paid a premium, but the developers? Geniuses. Absolute geniuses. They understand the anatomy better than half my attending surgeons. I told the board, give them whatever they want. We need this tech." I looked at Tyler. He was nodding in agreement. I looked at my mother. She was staring at the ocean. I looked at David. He was glowing with pride for a machine that he thought validated his brilliance. He had no idea he was praising the very mind he had tried to lobotomize. He was worshiping the servant's tool. "It's funny," David said, taking a sip of wine. "I always told you that technology was a support role, but this software, it's almost like it thinks like a surgeon, a master surgeon." I placed my glass on the table. The sound of the crystal hitting the stone was sharp. "I'm glad you like it, Dad," I said. The interface was the hardest part to design. David stopped chewing. The fork hovered halfway to his mouth. "What did you say?" "Panacea," I said, leaning forward slightly. "That's my company, Dad. My code, my patent. I signed the licensing agreement with your hospital board yesterday morning. You're not just implementing a new system, you're implementing me." The silence that fell over the table was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. I watched the realization hit him in waves. First, confusion. He wasn't the master of his domain anymore. He was a user, a customer. He was paying a premium to the very daughter he had discarded because she was useless. Tyler made a choking sound, setting his water glass down hard. He looked from me to David, his eyes wide. He realized the hierarchy had just inverted. The golden boy was now working for the exile. David's face went gray. You own Panacea?" "I built it," I said, "with the servant's tools you despised." For a moment, I thought he might yell. I thought he might storm out, but he didn't. He did something worse. He smiled. It was a tight, desperate grimace, an attempt to rewrite history in real time. "Well," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "this is extraordinary. I always knew you had a brilliant medical mind, Chloe, even if you applied it differently. This validates everything. We should discuss the integration. As a consultant, perhaps I could—" I held up a hand. "I'm just saying," he pressed, desperation creeping in, "that this is a family triumph. We can—" "There is no we," I said. My voice was calm, devoid of the anger I thought I would feel. You don't get to pivot, Dad. You don't get to claim this. You fired me from this family. You told me I was nothing without your name. Well, now, your hospital is paying 7 figures a year to use mine. I stood up. The ocean breeze fluttered the tablecloth. I have a meeting with my CTO in 20 minutes, I said, checking my watch. You need to leave, Chloe, my mother whispered, finally finding her voice. Please. The gate code expires in 10 minutes, I said. Don't make me call security. They stood up. They looked small against the backdrop of the Pacific. They looked like guests who had overstayed their welcome. They walked back through the house in silence, but this time they didn't look at the architecture with judgment. They looked at it with fear. I watched from the foyer as the heavy front door clicked shut. I watched the white rental car wind its way down the driveway and disappear onto the coast highway. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel lonely. I felt the clean, sharp relief of a successful amputation. The necrotic tissue was gone. The wound was closed. I was whole. Night fell over Laguna. The house lit up a beacon on the cliff. I sat in my office, the glass walls reflecting the stars. I opened my laptop. On the screen, a live dashboard showed the Panacea system running in hospitals across the country, including Philadelphia General. Status: active. Anomalies detected: 0. Lives protected: 142. I watched the data stream. It was a heartbeat. It was my heartbeat. I had traded the scalpel for the code, and in doing so, I had saved the most important patient of all, myself. I closed the laptop. I walked out to the edge of the infinity pool and listened to the ocean roar. If you've ever had to amputate a toxic relationship to save your own life, hit that like button and share this story. You are the surgeon of your own destiny.